He was so way up there as a broker that we counted all of the kilos that he had been responsible for coming into our country, and they added up to 47 tons.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. Man, I've got a long time friend here who has actually been on the Game of Crimes before, about a year and a half ago. But now he's got a book that came out, and his book describes one of the biggest operations that the Drug Enforcement Administration ever worked on. I would like to say that I got to participate in that, but I didn't. But you know how we are. We take credit for what we didn't do anyway. So, but it is a true honor to bring on a Navy veteran, a young man who worked with NCIS, and not on the TV show, but in real life, and then got a real job as a DEA agent and did that for 31 years. And wait, if you don't remember, and I'll tell you what his previous episode number was and all that. But if you don't remember what all he's done, we're going to cover that quickly. But ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mike Chavarria. Mike, brother, thank you so much for coming back.
It sure is good to see you, Steve.
Brother, I feel the same. It's you know, that's the thing about retiring. You're afraid that you're going to lose that camaraderie and contact with all your old friends. But if you work at it, you can stay in touch.
And I'm sure your fan base, they know every time you show up, it seems like you're getting handsomer every day.
Yeah, and I've already told Mike I'm not sending him any money. I'm not sending him a check. I'm not even going to bounce him the check over to his house. But we're going to have some fun today, I'll tell you that. And just like we always do every week, we have our small town police blotter. And just like I do every week, I waited till yesterday to send a story to Mike and ask him if he'd participate. Didn't even hesitate. And our disclaimer just before we get started here, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people. We talk about bad people doing bad things to good people, not good things to them, bad things to them. We take our stories very seriously, especially a lot of things we're going to talk about today, but we never want to miss an opportunity to have a good laugh at some of the stupid antics that people who think they're criminals pull and then they get caught. So, Mike, if you're in Tennessee, if you would, brother, tell us about this idiot in Tennessee.
All right. I love telling this story because, you know, you're an old Tennessee boy way back when.
That's right.
So you'll appreciate this. Takes place in Knoxville. I know you're in Middle Tennessee, but so a man, you know, attempts to rob a gas station and he uses a handwritten note. And the handwritten note is on his pay stub. His pay stub has all of his information, got his full name and address. So he walks in.
Of course it does.
Of course it does. Of course it does. He hands and I've got I got a theory about this. He hands the clerk the note demanding cash, and he flees with whatever he could grab. I'm suspecting a Snicker bar, Hostess Twinkie, something along those lines, something real valuable. The clerk quickly realizes that the would-be criminal basically turned in a fully completed identity sheet where he just kind of lays himself out. And so there's no fingerprints necessary. So the police pretty much drive to the address on the note, and guess what? He's sitting there in the same clothes that he was described wearing at the time he robbed the store. So, you know, case closed. Now, I have a theory.
Uh-oh.
And I know because I live there. And you know because you're from Tennessee. I think he was seriously intoxicated with some moonshine. That's moonshine country. So that's the only way I could explain that idiocy, that stupidity. But
well, you know what? Moonshine we might be able to accept just as long as it's not meth.
Right. Moonshine's a different category.
Our number one rule here on the Game of Crimes is kids don't do meth.
Absolutely. Moonshine is a different category. I think we'll agree.
It is. Have you ever tried it?
Yeah.
I hated it. Ugh.
Yeah. No, you got to sip it. It's like a bad tequila. You gotta sip it.
I just couldn't get around that yeasty smell in it, and didn't do anything for me. All right, thank you, brother. And listen, you know, I'm in Florida now, and there are absolutely no shortage of idiots here in our state of Florida, criminal idiots when it comes to that. Well, maybe just regular idiots too. We got way more. I tell you, the driving here, there's idiots out every day. That's my biggest complaint here. But This story starts off with Beamer me up, Scotty. Not beam me up, but Beamer me up. So after crashing a stolen BMW yesterday, a Florida man denied swiping the wheels, explaining to cops that he was actually teleported into the vehicle. Mm-hmm. You ever heard that story before?
No, but I like where we're going.
So the investigators, they I hate that word allege. They said that Calvin Johnson, who's 36 years old, took the 2018 convertible while the car owners was walking his dog at Ormond Beach's Centennial Park. Johnson's, according to the cops, rummaged through the unlocked BMW, found the keys in a cup holder. In short order, he was driving over 100 miles an hour. He crashed the car in a single vehicle accident. Passing motorists had to stop, and they had to drag his happy butt out of the car. So when the cops get there, Johnson, he told of his purported teleportation, made a passing reference to the X-Men and told officers, "You saved me from the aliens." So they took his happy butt to the hospital. He was placed under guard, and he's going to be transferred to the county jail upon his release. Johnson, he's been charged with grand theft auto. I think there's a game named after that. By the way, that game sucks, so don't try it out. And driving on a license that was suspended in 2019. His bond was set at $2,650, not $2,500, not $2,600, not $2,700, $2,650. I'm surprised it's not like and 17 cents. So Johnson, he's got an extensive criminal record, which includes convictions this year. This was in 2025 for trespassing, obstruction, loitering, resisting, and grand theft for stealing a $1,500 bicycle. When the heck did the bikes get that expensive? And when they asked him why he stole the bike, he said, just felt like it. Well, you feel like going to jail?
How old is he?
36 years old. He's old enough to know better.
He's got more time to, he's got more time to add it on.
Well, we were talking before we started recording here. As retirees, we say that every day is Saturday. Maybe he's retired already. He's getting bored. Oh, man. Thank you very much, Mike, for playing along on that. It's amazing the things that people do. And somebody like him who repeatedly gets caught doing whatever little crime he decides to do, you'd think at some point the light would come on and he'd say, maybe I'll choose a career other than trying to be a criminal because this ain't working out too good.
Well, I'm sure you'll agree, but back in the day when we were on the job, don't you think we caught mostly the dummies?
Oh yeah. The low-hanging fruit's what I refer to.
The low-hanging fruit. There's plenty of it.
Yes, it is. So just as a reminder to everybody, if you do recall Mike's previous appearance here on the show, that was and I wrote it down here, and now I can't find it. It was episode 143. And that was in May 6th of 2024. So it's been about a year and a half since we had Mike on here. And if you don't remember that, I think, as I remember, you and I first met when I was in SOD and you were stationed down in Mexico. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So, and I can remember coming down to you guys. You had your management conference in it was Cancun. It's a great place to have a management conference.
It's a hardship post for sure.
And the regional director at that time, I wasn't a big fan of his. I'm sure he was. I know he wasn't a big fan of the Special Operations Division, but after he tried to embarrass me in front of everybody, you and two other Mikes came up. I'm not going to mention their names, but just fantastic people down there. And you and I kind of started working together, and really I was more in a peripheral role because at that point I was the butt boy for the special agent charge of the Special Operations Division, which executive assistant was the title, but you're really a butt boy. Just got to know what your walk in life is. But, and to have just maintained a friendship throughout. It's the law enforcement way, it's that brotherhood and sisterhood thing.
I'll tell you, we have, and I'm proud to say we have a lot of good people in the DEA.
Absolutely.
And I was proud to be there working with them. And, you were one of them. And you not only are a good agent, but you're a good leader. And, so it's something to model.
I'm still not sending you any money.
Well, maybe before this is over, I can convince you at least send a few bucks,
Maybe I'll send you some Colombian coffee or something like that. But it'd be real coffee, not the white coffee. Now, if I recall right, you grew up in Costa Rica. You're originally from Costa Rica?
My father grew up, was raised, and then immigrated from Costa Rica as a commercial fisherman, and then he naturalized as a U.S. citizen way before I was born.
Glad he's not a fisherman today out in the Caribbean. There, it might be a little dangerous occupation.
Oh yeah,
That's another story, everybody.
There I was, minding my own business.
Imagine how surprised I was when.
Is that a rainbow?
Oh, yeah. So, Mike here is a graduate of San Diego State University. Very prestigious school in my book. I love San Diego. I love the guys out there that I work with and having a good time. You came out of college, went into the U.S. Navy for a stint. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you joined NCIS as a criminal investigator, did that for a couple of years. And then why did you decide you wanted to come over to DEA? What was the attraction there?
Well, when I was with NCIS, I was working nothing but drugs. I was doing a lot of undercover work. Fresh out of the Navy, had short hair. So I went out into town off the base, and we targeted civilian drug dealers who were servicing the Navy folks and the Marines with drugs, marijuana, LSD. They were the meth. They were the drugs of choice. And then I worked alongside DEA people and the San Diego's police street team. And the DEA guys say, "You like drugs so much, come on over with us, and you can have a blast." And I did.
How about that? Any regrets?
Of course not. Are you kidding? I would have done it if money wasn't an issue. We didn't have to pay bills. I'd have done it for free.
Yeah, that's the truth. It was. Yeah. I don't want to beat a dead horse and tell my story, but it just that first big drug seizure. I jokingly say that I was addicted to cocaine at that point, just in a different way.
That's a good addiction. Yeah.
And then you spent 31 years as special agent of the Drug Enforcement Administration, retiring at the end of 2017. Mm-hmm. And just quickly, the post, because I've still got your old notes here, which facilitates creating my one pager here that we're going to talk about. You came to the academy. You got stationed in Calexico, California, for a while. Mm-hmm. Then you lovingly were considered one of the border rats that you guys were sneaking down into Mexico, not sneaking, but going down and doing your job. And back then you could. Now I don't know that you could do that without getting killed.
No, it would take a congressional act to allow agents on the U.S. side to cross the border just to go, work with the Mex feds, eat tacos or do, and we were doing it all the time. I thought, and that was fresh out of the academy, I thought it was a foreign assignment.
Yeah. Well, you did take a foreign assignment. You went on Operation Snowcap.
Yeah, that came a couple years into the Calexico assignment that opened up, and I enjoyed that because I wanted to see what it would be like to transfer to a foreign country permanent.
And if you would just briefly describe for everybody what Operation Snowcap was about.
Operation Snowcap is a multi-agency project, and when I say multi-agency, it's the Department of Justice, DEA, it's the Department of State, and the DOD, Special Operations elements of the DOD, whether Army, Navy, even the Coast Guard, and the special operators from the Border Patrol called BORTAC. Border tactical teams. We were all down there working with the host nation to try to stem the flow of cocaine at its source. And the three source countries that most people know about, you were in one of them and played a very significant role. Colombia, number one, Peru and Bolivia. So I was in Bolivia during my tours, 90-day tours.
And apparently you liked that so much that you eventually got a transfer to Bolivia.
I did.
So where were you stationed there?
La Paz, where no human being should be living. It was like 11,000 feet. And, your head is swirling. You're popping Tylenol or you should be popping Tylenol like Skittles about 20 minutes before you land. And then when you step off the plane, it looks like you've stepped back into time 500 years. And it's the craziest thing. I never did fully acclimate to that environment. And what made it worse is I was constantly traveling. So your blood cells were, just running amok. And it was difficult, but it was fun. I worked less paramilitary stuff and more the Kingpins of Bolivia. And that was very interesting work.
Yeah. In Bogota, the altitude was about 8,500 feet. And my wife and I, when we would fly out of country and then come back after a vacation or R&R, we would have the altitude sickness for, the headaches for a day or two. I can't imagine at 11,000 feet. And there was, where were the other offices in Bolivia?
Cochabamba and Santa Cruz.
So I think I flew into Cochabamba to do an SOD thing there. And we flew through La Paz, and you don't even get off the plane. But I stood up to stretch. Remember the Intel analyst, Kevin O'Brien, he was on the plane. I saw him. Yeah. But I stood up and stretched, and I almost passed out. I can't breathe.
Two things you can't do are eat, a steak after you come off that plane, or drink booze, because you will certainly, be feeling it.
Wow. So let's see. You're down there for a couple of times. You come back to the U.S., and where were you stationed next?
I came back to the San Diego Field Division and worked along the border, San Ysidro. And again, we still had no offices, a representation in the consulates across the border in Tijuana. So yours truly was serving as a liaison, DEA liaison, going down there and working with the Mex feds. So that was fun.
Did you trust them?
No, because my time in Calexico, I had learned a lot. And I also read, I'm going to give a plug to Elaine Shannon right now. I read her book, Desperados, which is all about the tragic abduction and torture and murder of Kiki Camarena, our agent in Guadalajara, back in February 1985. So I was already familiar with the dynamic in Mexico and realized corruption was systemic. And, there were a lot of good cops, but they worked in a corrupt system. So guess what? They either, had a lengthy career being corrupt officials, or they were either jailed or dead. There was, or they were very, very clever at playing the line and playing both sides. I worked with a number of good individuals, police officials down in Mexico. But in Tijuana, it was at the height of the Chapo Guzman versus the Arellano Felix war, and there were killings almost on a biweekly basis. There were executions, public executions of federal and state and local police officials.
Jeez, I just can't imagine. I was in Colombia, but honestly, I think, based on what I know and what I've heard from experts like you, I think Mexico was more corrupt than Colombia.
Without a doubt. And I think a lot of people in our country, they think because they all speak Spanish, then it's all the same. What's the difference? Well, big difference culturally. And, when we talk about drug war, from personal experience, when you were working with the Colombian officials, they were in the drug war. They were in the fight bilaterally with us. They welcomed our assistance and our resources. Mexico never has. In all my years, they've made a good show of the appearance, but I've always seen it as a smoke and mirror game.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Then you end up going back overseas. You've got an extensive overseas career, but where'd you go this time?
Costa Rica, which was kind of nice because I went back to my father's birthplace, where I have sisters and other relatives, and then the counterparts. It was like working with domestic police. They were so transparent, honest, and hard charging. Cops were great.
And what a beautiful country.
Indeed.
That's Connie and I got to go there TDY. Well, I was there on business, but she went with me. And that's back when, I don't know if you ever knew Glenn Schneider on the job. Yep. He was stationed there. We went through language school together. So we spent some time with him and his family down there, but just a beautiful, beautiful place. And while you were there, is that during the time when the Special Operations Division or DEA and DOJ created what we commonly refer to as the 959 and 960 groups, the bilateral investigation units?
Yes. My partner, Joe Evans, who I still to this day think was one of DEA's best agents.
Absolutely.
Junior to me, but senior in experience. I learned a lot from him. And he was a case agent, and I, was supporting him as a co-case agent. But he had worked a number of the wire cases with our OIJ, with Gonzalo Balo. He is known throughout not just Central America, but Latin America, for his role in fighting the drug war. In any event, we would make one seizure after another, and we hooked into one case, and the 959 statute was created as a result of the case that we worked, targeting a Colombian organization that was staging their megaton quantities of cocaine in Costa Rica and moving it to another staging location in Guatemala. So we managed to get with our DOJ prosecutors, and they prosecuted that case. We ended up bringing a number of Colombian targets, two in particular who were considered high level. We brought them to justice, and based on that case, they created 959. And they also created a DEA group that dedicated specifically and solely to 959 category level cases, which are the highest level traffickers, where these kingpins operated as recluses, very difficult to grab and to establish, a prosecutable case. But if we could establish the fact that there was a conspiracy, all we needed was to show that they knew the cocaine was going to the United States, just 5 kilos, and we could prosecute them on that 959 charge.
One of the best things DEA and the Department of Justice ever did was create that bilateral investigative unit. It was fantastic. The cases they were making, they were bringing in Afghani drug lords, they were bringing in Pakistanis, and just like you say, people who have never stepped foot out of their own country but wished ill. And they facilitated activities that try to destroy the United States.
The long arm of the U.S. justice system.
Yep. And they're still in existence today. I just love it. If I were a young agent, that's what I would want to be assigned to. Of course, I mean, the travel and the commitment that was required of those guys, that leads to a lot of divorces. And my wife is very understanding, and she let me go play when I needed to go play. But I'm not sure she would have stood up for that because, we've had Rob Zach on here to talk about some of the 959 cases. We had one agent who was involved in a lot of undercover on 959, and I had to distort his voice and hide his face to bring him on here because he still has death threats against him. But even with a distorted voice, you can still pick up on that Massachusetts accent. But I mean, just dedicated people in there. I mean, you and I got tons of friends that were 959 alumni.
I love them. And you know what? One of the guys in this book, Lee Nash, Joe selected him when he went to take charge of the Panama office, selected Lee Nash, who was one of the very first 959 agents. And he was the one that helped us put this case together.
Lee is a hero amongst heroes when it comes to that 959 case. It's just phenomenal what he was able to do.
And one of the funniest DEA agents I've ever met.
He's a prankster.
He's a prankster.
We might have to get Lee on here on the show just to talk about some of the pranks he did.
Joe Arabic can tell you a few of them.
Oh,
like pretend, fake looking cockroaches in the shower.
So then from Guadalajara, from San Jose, what was your next assignment?
San Jose, from there I went to Guadalajara with a promotion. I was the resident agent in charge, the rack of Guadalajara, with 4 agents and an intel analyst. And
ladies and gentlemen, you may know this already, just in case you don't. That's like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. I mean, you're going into, if you want to find out where the major Mexican traffic leaders are, you go to Guadalajara. is just unbelievable. In fact, you told us a story on the last interview from a year and a half ago about who your daughter went to school with.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't know if I named him. I go ahead and name him now, but his was a kingpin, a Guatemalan kingpin called Otto. His name was Otto, Otto Herrera. And, he was there with his girls at the American school. And one of his girls happened to be my daughter's best friend, middle school. And here I was. We were asked as a lead from Guatemala to try to track him down because he fled after a $14 million seizure and a bunch of coke. But $14 million, he fled and came to Mexico because he was in bed with the Sinaloa Cartel, well, Sinaloa Federation at the time. And he was believed to be hiding in our area of responsibility, which not only was our state of Jalisco, but 5 states that bordered Jalisco. And so, I had assigned the lead to one of the agents, and so we had been looking for him for a month or two. And then I finally got frustrated, and we said, well, let's go down to Guatemala and get some more details about this guy. So we did. We came back. I'm sitting at the dinner table with my daughter, and and I learned that he had was married to an American woman, had 2 girls. And I thought, just for kicks, I'll ask my kids. So I said, hey, anybody know of a Guatemalan family? Maybe the kids are going to school. She goes, Dad, my best friend, so-and-so. I swear, I felt this knot in my stomach. I think I turned shades red, and I felt like an ass. And I should have. Because by the time I came to and realized he was under our nose, he had just left. My daughter said, Dad, they had to leave because the dad got a good job in Riverside, California. And Riverside, California. And then she said, yeah, the so-and-so, the friend, said she's going to be taking surfing lessons. Well, if you know anything about Riverside, California, you don't put a surfboard on sand.
Yeah.
That's not where you surf because it's a desert. So make a long story short, I couldn't sign her up as an informant, but I put her to work. And she got online. She helped us track the IP of where the mom and the daughters were living in Puerto Vallarta. So we did our little surveillance, ended up tracking them down. And then we developed a couple phone numbers, put the dad in Mexico City by himself. And of course, we caught him because he was waiting at the airport for his girlfriend to fly in from it's always the girlfriend. Yep. And so we grabbed him with the Mexican cops. And then, of course, he quickly paid his way out of jail. And then he was snatched again in Colombia, or he may have surrendered. But
he was a big time target, big time fugitive.
There's even I think a documentary where he appears and he's talking about, he avoids the mention of Mexico. He talks about the Mexican traffickers, but not living there and getting caught there. But he has got a very colorful story.
Yeah. Man. I mean, and so that's what I mean. You're right in the fire. You're right there with the major traffickers, the major Mexican traffickers or their associates. It's just one of the most dangerous places to be. Well,
and one of the most, opportunities to embarrass yourself too, because they were literally our neighbors, all these kingpins, or their families. Yeah. And I had happened to be in Otto's house and met him and shook his hand at one point. I think we may have had a beer together. And of course I knew he had an armored car, but so many businessmen did. And I just, well,
hindsight's always 20/20.
I'm still working on 20/30 here. But yeah, no, it was something I'm not too proud of, but it sure was makes for a funny story.
Yeah, I mean that's how close. That's I mean, literally, you were living right there next to the guy almost. So you do your time. How long did you stay in Guadalajara?
4.5 years. Probably one of my favorite assignments. Definitely foreign assignments was my favorite.
And then you come out. Where do you go to next?
From there, I went to Houston.
As a group supervisor, right?
And I was group supervisor of 12 agents. And it was a regular enforcement group. And that's where I hooked up with my good buddy, Keith Bishop, who gave me my nickname, Pinche. And
if you don't know what that means, everybody go look it up.
Yeah, look it up. The rude version, the rude definition.
And we're going to come back to Houston, but out of Houston, you were there and then you got transferred again, right?
From Houston, I went back to Mexico City as an SOD liaison, Special Operations Division liaison.
And that's when we just started taking people from Special Operations who knew the entire workings of SOD and putting them in different parts of the world, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was. I think Derek Maltz came up with that, and Derek's been a guest here on the show, and he was the special agent in charge when I was the executive assistant. Just think the world of that guy, still do, for the things he's doing. And then you come out of Mexico after a couple more years back to Houston, and that's where you finally retired in 2017, correct?
Yes.
So that's a lot, and I didn't want to waste a lot of time on that, but I want to create your background so that people understand. We're here to talk about a book today, and the name of your book is Junior, a Son of the Gulf Cartel. It's based on true events. I just finished reading the book yesterday on a flight from Houston back to Orlando. I'd read most of it, but I wanted to finish it before today's interview. And we're not going to give up the ending of the book. I'm trying to tease you folks, because if you want to get a real inside look, a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, of DEA, how they operate in an international environment, how people like Mike and so many of our brave men and women volunteer. You can't be forced to go work in a foreign country with DEA. You have to volunteer to step up. And you're living next door to Kingpin drug traffickers, some of the biggest narcotics traffickers in the world. And then see how DEA does that. See how the Colombian and Mexican cartels work in conjunction with Guatemala and all the other countries that are involved. This is the book. It's based on actual events. Mike, you've changed some of the names, correct?
Yes.
And that's just because some of the people are still living. Some of the names he used, like Keith Bishop and Lee Nash, they're still thriving. I'm sure Lee's still pulling pranks on everybody, probably getting fired from job after job. Just kidding, Lee. Just kidding. But this came from an operation you were involved with. What was the name of the operation?
I call it one of DEA's unsung successful SOD operations called Band of Brothers. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek Band of Brothers because it was focused while I was assigned in Guadalajara. And early on, we determined there was a large-scale trafficking organization that was coming up as a growing threat right underneath our noses, and they were completely off our radar. So we put our heads together, dedicated some resources, and identified these guys as a band of brothers. They were siblings who were working with the Sinaloa Federation leaders or lieutenants that came out of the Guadalajara Cartel dismantlement back in the late 80s. And these guys were, running the Sinaloa Federation, which was the strongest and most threatening cartel in all of Mexico. So these guys, we identified them, but we had no way of infiltrating them. And so the hunt was on for informants that could go undercover and penetrate the organization.
Now, at that time, there were three main leaders, I guess, of the Sinaloa Cartel, right? Federation. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. Is that right?
Well, that's the Guadalajara Cartel, pretty much that gave birth to the Sinaloa Federation. So the cartel was formed by Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, who comes up in Narcos, Mexico.
Right.
He was the brainchild, and what he wanted to do was control all of Mexico because of all the lucrative corridors that led into the United States. And so he got together with Rafael Caro Quintero and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and they formed the Guadalajara Cartel. Well, the Camarena abduction and murder was the beginning of the end of the Guadalajara Cartel. They started to fall. First, Rafael Caro Quintero was picked up in Costa Rica. Ernesto Fonseca was arrested there, I think in Guadalajara or Puerto Vallarta. And then by 1989, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo was arrested and imprisoned. So by 1989, that gave birth to what became the Sinaloa Cartel, or the Sinaloa Federation. And they were membered primarily by all the lieutenants, the underlings and I'll name a number of them: El Azul, Nacho Coronel, Mayo Zambada, Arturo Beltran Leyva, the Ariano Felix organization. They moved up to Tijuana to take charge of the Tijuana corridor. And then there were those guys that we identified, Los Güeros, which means kind of blondies. It means They look like gringos. They're the group of brothers. And so we wanted to focus in our energies on targeting Los Güeros.
And our listeners, you may recognize Rafael Caro Quintero name. We call him RCQ. He was just extradited to the United States, earlier this year?
Yes.
Just to stand charges for kidnapping, torturing, and murdering Kiki Camarena. If you've heard about the Red Ribbon campaign, that's in honor and memory of Kiki. And that is one thing the DEA has never lost focus on. It's called Operation Leyenda, trying to track down those people. And I believe Kiki was the early 1980s when Kiki, or mid 1980s when Kiki 85. Was murdered, right?
85. Yep.
Yeah. And I didn't come on the job until 87. What year did you come on?
The end of 85.
Yeah. So, I don't know if you knew this. We might have talked about it before, but Javier was a brand new agent also that got stationed in Austin, Texas. One of very, very few Spanish speaking agents in Texas for DEA. And he was pulled in Mexico for a few months to work on Kiki's case in the investigation because of his Spanish speaking abilities. So, and I just, throw that out there because that's one of the things I respect about DEA so much is we have very long memories and we don't forget. And we're certainly not going to sweep an action like that under the rug. Later on, a good friend of ours, especially of yours, Victor Cortez, they kidnapped and tortured him, and luckily our agents were able to go in to get him and saved him. And he finished out his career in DEA. Just another hero. It's amazing. It is truly amazing, the men and women that come into DEA. I mean, yes, we do have a small percentage of our people who are slugs. Just recently you saw in the newspaper where one of our agents, a retired agent, was caught laundering, I think it's $12 million. And you know what? If he's guilty, they should bury him under the jail along with anybody else that was involved in it, because he took the same freaking oath that you and I took. And that was to defend and protect our country and the citizens of our country. And when you take an oath, that's a serious thing. That's not something to be taken lightly. And as I said on many shows before, just because we retired, that does not mean that your oath expires. Mm-hmm. That's something we take serious, and when we try to live up that through the end of our lives. Which is one reason I do the show here, so that I can bring these heroes on like Mike and all the other folks, the great folks that I've had on the show here, just so you can hear their stories from them. And let's get back to that instead of me pontificating, because I get off on these tangents.
So Mexico, what I have to say about the whole Camarena tragedy was that the Mexicans underestimated us.
Yeah, big time. It's just like when Al-Qaeda blew up the Twin Towers, and people referred to it, you poked the bear one time too many. Mm-hmm. The response of DEA and the United States at that time, shutting down the border between Mexico and the United States to force the Mexicans to get off their lying asses and get back in the investigation. Elaine Shannon's book is fantastic. She's an unbelievable author. I've met Elaine several times, and it's called Desperado if you want to read that book. But that's not the book we're here to talk about. I'm going to have to bring Elaine on here to talk about that book.
She would be a good guest, and I've always thought after reading that book, and I've read it a couple times, that not much has changed. Number one. Number two, that should be mandatory reading for any agent going to Mexico.
I agree. And I'm turning around. I've got the book here. It's not a book you're going to read in a day. It's comprehensive, I'll say.
Comprehensive is a good description, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, it's thorough, and she's just an unbelievable author on top of that. So that's not her only book. She's got several others out there.
She's an ardent supporter of DEA.
Very much so. So to get back to the Operation Band of Brothers, in the beginning, you guys didn't have a lot to go on other than you'd heard about the Gueros, the two brothers. Mm-hmm. But then an event took place that just really set this thing into motion. Can you, I don't want to give away too much about the book because I want people to read it, but, and ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you, there's so much action in this book. It's, you start reading it and you don't want to put it down. You really don't. I say that about every book on here, but maybe I just enjoy reading these types of books, but this one is right up there with the rest of them. So what was that activity, Mike?
Thank you. Okay, so I told you our big goal was to figure out how to find a source, an informant that could infiltrate the organization. And this book really is focused on those resources, the informants, because they're the core of this story, because what we do is touch on the human side of the drug war, as opposed to, some of the mechanics of it. But in this case, there were two informants. The first one we discovered was up in Miami, and he was faced with being charged with cocaine conspiracy, and to make a long story short, we ended up recruiting him together with our Miami colleagues, and we ended up bringing him down. By 2004, he was in Mexico and working at our behest, or at least was tasked to do whatever he could do to get back with the kingpins of the Sinaloa Federation, particularly the Güeros. And so, but unfortunately, all of Mexico, it was a very long leash. We couldn't, keep him, we couldn't sit on him. So he was allowed to kind of run around, and we were hoping that he was working for us and doing our tasking. I left Guadalajara in 2005 and transferred to Houston. Well, after a good amount of pressure on that Colombian informant, he finally gave us a tip of another broker. This Colombian was a broker of major cocaine deals, smuggling ventures between Colombians and major investors like Chapo Guzman, Mayo Zambada, who are based in Mexico. But he tipped us to a guy who had taken his family up to Houston Medical Center, looking for a life-saving miracle for his infant daughter. And the tip came to me after just a month of being there in Houston. One of the agents, Jimmy Martinez, called me and said, Mike, the Colombians finally coughed up some information that might be of use. This guy tells me about him. He says, you might be able to locate him at the medical center, Children's Hospital. And so I did. The Colombian informant probably thought we were just going to do surveillance on him, take photographs, see who he met, whatever. But we thought, hey, get up to the plate, swing the bat, and see what happens. So we grabbed a couple agents in a group, went off to the hospital, and located this guy. Got him separated him from his wife, and approached him, and we recruited him. And I have to say, it was a bit gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching to have to do that while the guy was dealing with a crisis, a family crisis. But DEA first, you know what I mean? I took the oath. That's my job. This guy was a target. And we didn't know at the time how significant he was. So the title of the book says it all, A Son of the Gulf Cartel. His father, at one time, after the fall extradition of Juan Garcia Abrego, became the head of the Gulf Cartel shortly in partnership with Oscar Malherbe. The father's name was Raul Valladares. They were in charge until OCL came in and created the Zetas and basically took over the Gulf Cartel. So that occurred shortly into my tour in Houston. That was the summer of 2005.
And you're thinking, welcome back to the United States.
Yeah. Well, it was nice to be, have U.S. police powers and be able to go and do the job because, frankly, I tell people, drug war, it might not be taking place in Mexico, but it's sure taking place in our country.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, well, that could lead to another tangent, and I won't do that to y'all. Now, some of you guys might think, some of our listeners might think that that's kind of cold-hearted to go to a children's hospital to recruit somebody. But this person, and again, you didn't know at that time how high level this guy was. Turns out he was way up there, wasn't he?
He was so way up there as a broker that we counted all of the kilos that he had been responsible for coming into our country, and they added up to 47 tons.
Wow. Even that's more than personal use in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like you guys went in the hospital and said, hey, come with us. You folks just read the book, because Mike lays it out very well how they were able to employ some surreptitious activities to get this guy in a position where they could talk to him. They didn't walk in front of his family. They didn't embarrass him in front of people. They got him off to a private location, had a conversation, and then let him go back to dealing with his family situation.
Yeah. So he started out, a bad guy, a criminal, for us, just like any other kingpin target. And he quickly became a protagonist. His charm, you could look at him and not see, he wasn't drenched in gold. He didn't have that classic narco look with, the Gucci shoes. No, he looked like you and me. We would have probably carried a conversation on the airplane, maybe even sat next to him in a bar, carried on. He was a very pleasant individual, decent, good looking guy. He was in his 30s, late 30s. And, but here he was a kingpin trafficker sitting in our hospital.
How much of that did you know before you approached him? Did you know about all that dope and you didn't know about the father's relationship?
No, none of it. All I knew was from the tip that Jimmy gave me, sent it to me on our little intranet, and laid it out that this guy was a broker associate like our Colombian. So we knew what the Colombian was all about and how high level he was. So, and we knew that this guy in Houston was connected to the Güeros. So that was it. For me, I was armed with enough information to, basically blow some smoke.
Yeah. Oh, man. And boy, you talk about hitting a home run. This thing, you had no charges on him. This guy was free to walk away. If he was that concerned, he could have, fled back to Mexico. But that's not what he chose to do.
If you look at the book cover, I think the book cover really, says a lot. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So on the book cover, you see a fork in the road as the dad is walking his son, because Junior was a son of the Gulf Cartel. He grew up in that environment, and he's pulling a wagon loaded with cocaine, and he's heading off. In the distance is a big city. I mean, it pretty much New York, right, which was where most of the coke was going. So he's coming to the fork in the road, which symbolizes the crossroads he came to and the choice he had to make. He made the choice, and that choice inevitably affected his life, his family's life, and the success we had with the operation.
Did you come up with that?
Band of Brothers?
No, the cover.
Yes. Yeah, that was my idea.
Dude, I didn't know you were that deep. Holy cow.
I didn't do the art. I just came up with the idea.
That's fantastic, because I'm looking at the cover now on Amazon, and you can see the border wall is right there along the road. That's impressive.
Yeah. Well, it tells the story. The story is pretty. I was involved, so I knew the message.
So how did it develop from that point? Did you just say, okay, think about this, here's my card, give me a call?
No, because, here he was, a kingpin. He could have easily walked out of that hospital and said, honey, take care of things. I'm going back home, and so I think we convinced him that the only way out was to work with us. And he was very resistant naturally, because, he was betraying everything he had grown up to believe in. His father was his mentor and idol. His criminal associates were like his brothers. And, but we knew we had to get him on the team. So to do that, we went to work right away. With debriefing him, getting all the information out of him. And that took a few days, and put him in a hotel room right there in the same hotel where his wife was. And we just got him away. He, wanted to keep it secret from his wife, and we did. And then we got him on the phone. We got him on what we call, very well, consensual calls, which is his authorization for for DEA to record his conversations that he would have, with all these other criminal associates. And of course, what we were looking for was evidence and overt acts to start documenting. So that we could at one point in time prosecute some of these other players between Mexico and Colombia. And so he went to work right away. We got him on a number of different calls. And before you know it, we realized this guy's a major player. He's not just a broker. He is able to go face to face with Mexico's biggest traffickers, to include at one point he met Amado Carrillo, who was known as the Lord of the Skies. And he was, Amado Carrillo was part of the Sinaloa Federation. He went to Juarez and was seen as the leader of the Sinaloa Federation from Juarez. And in Juarez, he created, or he built a fleet of aircraft and doubled and tripled the amount of cocaine coming into the country in Mexico. So our guy met with him face to face, and that's what really helped him, open some doors.
What was his motivation to flip? I mean, did you guys promise him we'll give you $1 bazillion? What was the motivation there?
Well, after, running it all by the U.S. attorney, he was going to get some immunity, but he had to put quite a bit on the table. But the real reason why he flipped was for the love of his family. You could see it. You could see that although a hardened criminal, a lifelong criminal, 47-ton criminal, he was more concerned about his family, and that was what made him come onto Team USA, and he embraced it after a short while.
Yes, he did. It's to the point that it got comical.
Yeah, it sure did. We came to like him. I know that's not something that DEA promotes, or although we followed protocols and everything, but we genuinely felt a bit of guilt, remorse for having put him through all that, but we took a big liking to him.
Yeah, and that's something that's it can be the bane of many agents, their careers, in the fact that you don't want the informant running you. You want to run the informant. It's so many, especially young agents, and it happened in this case, not with your informant, but another informant in Miami, where the informant was telling the agents what to do, or at least that was the appearance.
It certainly was. So the two informants in the case, they were both recruited at different times, at different circumstances, different locations, but they were tasked to infiltrate the same targets, the same drug trafficking targets. So one informant was being controlled jointly by the Miami and the Guadalajara offices, and our informant was being controlled by us, and that is where kind of things started to fray, the relationship between us and the guys in Miami. Now, I knew them; they're good guys, and their hearts were in the right place, but they had their hands on the tail of a tiger, and that tiger was pretty adamant it did not want to be tamed. And that was the problem. It was the beginning of a series of issues. And I think the book is meant not to attack these particular agents, but draw light or bring light onto a bureaucratic situation that we all confront in this business. And that is that our leadership is judged upon its metrics, which means powder on the table, prosecutions, stats. Everybody wants stats. No matter what they say in the academy, that's a bunch of. The real world is, what have you done for me? And, because everybody gets promoted, they get rewarded, they get compensated, bonuses, assignments, all based on stats. And that, I think, is what came to play in this story. And I think that was one of my goals, was to bring some light to it.
Absolutely. And it's the sad thing is, you remember when the inspectors used to come in, every 3 years, inspectors would come down from headquarters. They inspect the entire division. And the first thing we had to do as worker bees was answer this. They gave you 2 or 3 pages of things that you had to answer. And the first questions were, how many cases did you initiate during this time period? How many informants did you sign up? How many people did you put in jail? How much drugs did you seize? What's the quantity of assets? It's all about quantity, not quality.
Yeah.
And they'll argue with you that, no, if you're doing your job, the quality comes along with the quantity. Not so. It's, especially in a smaller office, because I came after Miami and Colombia, I ended up in Greensboro, North Carolina. You could, not that you do this, or that, some people do this. You go adopt the state and local cases over. You do the paperwork. You had no investigative responsibilities in the seizure whatsoever, but you got stats to put on the piece of paper. It's ridiculous.
Even our guys overseas, they do the same thing. They got newspaper articles and they put it out like it's ooh, look at us, DEA.
I know. But, and that's the sad part of this thing. It's, it was like this with controlled deliveries, where, our agents in Texas along the border are making seizures, and they want to do a controlled delivery I was stationed in Greensboro, North Carolina for a few years. It's manpower intensive. We only had 5 agents and no task force. So you're calling on your state and local counterparts to participate. It could be, I think, 1,200-1,400 pounds of weed were coming up, and you do a controlled delivery with it. And then the agents that are coming, listen, we want to prosecute this in our territory in Texas. Well, the first time you're thinking, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing all the work up here. You don't know your butt from a hole in the ground up here. Mm-hmm. And that attitude starts setting in. But then you have a senior guy coming in and say, whoa. What's the best for the investigation? Where's the guy going to get the most severe punishment? How are you facilitating? This is nothing more than a controlled delivery. And these are mopes. You want to see where the case goes from there. So, and thankfully a senior agent came in and educated me on that, about, his name's Charlie Graham. I love Charlie Graham to death. Still do to this day, one of my very best friends. But it's easy to get territorial, isn't it? And that's like, no, wait a minute, this is my territory. We're going to prosecute here. Well, what good is that going to do to prosecute that when you really had nothing to do with the investigation?
Yeah. Well, in this particular story, even though the tip generated from the Colombian in Mexico, he didn't know that we flipped his close colleague. That was his colleague. He didn't know we flipped him. And so now what we see is a golden opportunity. Informant handling 101. You got two informants working the same targets. Let's see how accountable we can hold them. And let's see what they're reporting, not only on the targets they're infiltrating, getting close to, but one another. So, nothing a prosecutor would love nothing more than to be able to take two independent sources, cooperators, who are saying the exact same thing about a defendant.
Yes.
So that's what we were hoping on.
Exactly. And even so, when I said, talking about in Greensboro, these controlled deliveries coming into Greensboro, and I'm saying, okay, take it back to your jurisdiction. I was catching grief from the resident agent in charge, and might even get a call from the ASAC. What do you think you're doing? You're doing the work and you're giving them the stats. Well, that's what it was stats. That's all it was. It wasn't a criminal organization. That's not what we do. And, of course, I'm not saying that, but that's what I'm thinking in the back of my mind, because you do what you're told. But, and the other thing is I learned this in Miami, that when you've got these informants, when you've got a few free hours, you go follow your informant, so you can corroborate that what he's telling you is true, unbeknownst to him. What's he doing in the daytime? He's not continually all day long under your control. So you go out and do surveillance on them, just so that you can say, yes, we corroborated this information. Well, how'd you do that? Well, we followed him around. How do you know he wasn't dirty? Well, we followed him around on these days during this time, and just to see what his activities were. And there was nothing suspicious. And the things that he was calling in and reporting to us, we were able to corroborate, because he didn't know we were watching him that day. So we're talking about handling informants here. 101 is what this kind of comes out to here. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case entirely. You guys were doing what you were supposed to do. You were maintaining that distance, even though you have developed a friendship and a liking to this informant. And ladies and gentlemen, you understand more about it when you read the book. And we're going to call it quit here today, because we've been going a little over an hour here. But we're going to get into a little more of the meat of this book. Mike, thank you so much for getting us started and piquing our interest here and coming back on the show for a second time. I guess you're just a glutton for punishment. I'm glad you are. But ladies and gentlemen, please join us again tomorrow. Thank you so much for being here today. In the meantime, God bless. Stay safe out there.